About sports and other topics relatable to sports fans. And what we have this week is a rarity where we actually have our co-host in the same building that I am in. Joining us today from Chicago is Anthony Samroo.
What's going on?
So one sport that we don't talk about as much as all the other sports is basketball. So we have a basketball mind here, so we're going to have a more of a focus on basketball today, just to take advantage of the situation. As far as what's going on right now, the top team in the league is the top team in the Eastern Conference is the Washington Wizards. Like, how do you feel that the Washington Wizards are doing this? Very, very surprising. 10-4 start. What's working for them?
They just have gelled together. They play cohesive basketball, and right now they got it clicking on all cylinders.
What I'm going to say is, I believe, the three Lakers that ended up coming in from the Russell Westbrook trade, I think they all have something to prove, and I think that it was a jolt of maturity that they're going through right now, and they all want to prove everybody wrong, because everybody's going to naturally think, especially the casual sports fans, is LeBron James and Anthony Davis, carried anybody into winning the championship in 2020, which is a very, very believable stance. But it takes other role players, it takes other people playing their parts too in order for the whole team to operate correctly. And then especially in this year where the Lakers are off to a rougher start than usual. We'll get to that in a little bit, but. So we have Washington, and do you think how well do you think they'll do this season? Even though it's still the early going, there's still we're just about 20% into the season. But do you see them making the playoffs? Do you see them being a force? What do you predict for them in the future?
I do see them being a playoff team. However, I do not see them sustaining the number one seed right now. I think they'll fall back down to reality soon.
Definitely have to agree on that. Yeah, right. All right, so then we also we have the Brooklyn Nets. Seems like they had a bit of a rough early going to this very early going to the season. They have right in the ship a bit, going 11-5. In this early season, but then also they got absolutely it seems like anytime they play a contending team, they get absolutely walloped. What do you think of the Brooklyn Nets right now?
So I think they're missing the key piece with Kyrie gone. Obviously, I think he's an important piece to a championship team. He's proved that years with playing with LeBron James. So I think Brooklyn's going to have to do something at the trade deadline to try to bring somebody else in, another point guard that can make a difference. Because it doesn't look like Kyrie's coming back anytime soon. So, in order for Brooklyn to make some noise, they're going to have to probably try to make a trade.
Yeah, absolutely. Even though the early stages of the way this Eastern Conference is shaping out is very, very, I'd say, kind of on the upside down. You wouldn't expect the Wizards to be number one, and a couple other teams we'll get to in a little bit, having the success, while the last year's Eastern Conference Finals matchup is not even in the expanded playoff picture. But that being said, it's definitely an uphill battle without Kyrie Irving being available. Do you see the Brooklyn Nets making a move to try to get him out and to get him to a place where he could play? Like, how do you see that unfolding?
I feel like they're probably going to try to dangle him in a trade. I'm not sure if a team is going to bite. However, I think they're going to try, and if not, I'm not sure what route they go. They have to do something, otherwise they're just going to be. I won't say on the outside looking in because I still think they're going to still make the playoffs because they still got enough depth. However, I just don't see them making noise in the playoffs.
Yeah, the one I think the main thing going against Brooklyn and just any basketball team who wants to move a megastar is the megastar has to accept the terms of the trade, even though classically any team that has rights and if there's a no trade clause or no movement clause, then those particular players in any sport would be able to kind of narrow down and pick where they can go. Basketball it's like an unwritten rule where you could still they could, let's say like they agree to a trade with the Minnesota Timberwolves and then he ends up going over there, but then he could refuse to go and then that would just totally bust the trade to begin with. So it really the Brooklyn Nets right now are very hampered by the fact that they're not going to be able to even get max value. They'll be lucky if they get max value in return for Kyrie Irving and with the situation they have going on at the moment. What I think everybody's waiting for is for January they'll have we'll have a new leader of the helm in New York City. So at that point maybe they aren't gonna like the new governor is not going to have have the strict rule of everybody has to be vaccinated in order to perform or show up at events, and then in that case, Kyrie Irving could just come right back and then start doing his thing and be a little rusty in the beginning, but then obviously for have a couple of months before playoff time, barring injury, he'll be able to come back. So I think this that has to be one of the options moving forward because obviously what they're doing now is they can't sustain it. You can't have a star player just sitting out, that could help the team that's not helping the team. And then, you're moving on, progressing through the season. And, eventually James Harden could have an injury even though he's been rather available most of his NBA career. Kevin Durant has had health issues here and there. So, but there could be a situation where all three stars are out, but then one of them could have been in there helping out. So it's a very ugly situation going on in Brooklyn. That right now they're doing what they can, but there has to be some kind of solution down the road where everybody would just be happy and everybody could be clicking on all cylinders. I can't imagine Kyrie Irving doesn't like sitting out and not getting paid. I'm sure So that's just. There has to be a situation that ends up being more progressive moving forward.
Well, I want to throw in that James Harden is coming back from an injury as well, so he's not sustaining his usual 28 to 30 points per game. He's somewhere around 18, I believe, right now, 18 or 19.
Yeah.
So he's not him being not his self is like it's kind of dampering Brooklyn too as well. Because now Kevin Durant is now he has to shoulder the load. They don't have anybody else really, so they have to either try to pry Kyrie back or try to make a trade at the deadline. See what happens.
Yeah, definitely. And one other point to the James Harden struggle is there is talk that since the NBA instilled this season where you can't shoot into somebody to try to get the foul calls. That seems to have changed a lot of players, like the way they've been able to regularly get to the free throw line, and at the ultimately the way they've been able to produce points. James Harden's points are down per game. Damian Lillard's points are down per game. Trae Young's points are down per game. There's a lot of and they're getting to the foul line less because you can't theatrically try to make a shot movement while you're getting fouled in order to get the foul call. So how important has that been? How important has that impact how important has that impact the shooters as opposed to the way they've regularly operated?
Well, now, I mean, yeah, you can obviously see the difference now. Despite Harden himself, I mean, he's usually throwing himself at other players, and he's getting the calls on it too. He used to get the calls on it. So since they took that away, you can see a little bit of a difference. But you combine that with with him coming back from that injury, and right now you just have an average James Harden. So in order for Brooklyn to progress, they're going to need him to be the James Harden that we all know.
Yeah, I mean, the $50 million player basically is what they need to move forward. But, they're even proving, so basically you're having like let's say 1 3/4 of a superstar as opposed to having 3 superstars that were originally, that supposed to be the front runners to get to the NBA Finals with the Los Angeles Lakers. It's very, very challenging time for the Brooklyn Nets. And you wouldn't even think, you would think that, like they signed the superstars and then they traded for James Harden. Not only do they trade for James Harden, but they trade the house for James Harden. I mean, they have, almost no first-round picks, or, if they have the series of first-round picks they lost and the swapping and different things like that. I mean, they compromised their future of the franchise to get James Harden in there. And now you have the situation that's unfolding now, and just one injury or 2 injuries ends up just completely bottoming out the organization. So a lot of big decision-making has to happen with the Brooklyn Nets. All right, so we'll move on to the Chicago Bulls. Chicago Bulls are 10-5. Surprised, not surprised? How do you feel?
I'm a little bit shocked. I didn't think they would gel together that soon. With Zach LaVine there, I knew he was going to be, himself. But with Lonzo Ball, and then I just didn't think that it was going to gel together that fast. So they're playing some good basketball. They lost a tough one last night to Portland. They had the lead. I think they had a 20-something point lead, and then they just. I was looking at the highlights, and in the fourth quarter, they just lost that whole lead and gave it away, and so they gave a tough one to Portland.
Which is earlier in the season, they ended up beating the Boston Celtics in a similar fashion, which was reversed, where the Bulls were down about 20 points in the fourth quarter, and then they ended up like clawing back and getting the win over the Celtics. So I'm going to say DeMar DeRozan's having an MVP season. I think he's another player that had something to prove, that people, they were thinking he was over the hill. They were thinking that, maybe he should go sign another, a smaller contract with somebody else and just ring chase. He came in there and is doing really well, averaging 26 points a game. Lonzo Ball is, I think he's another one who had something to prove, that, people didn't think that he was as great as he was boasted to be, especially getting drafted by the Lakers initially. I want to say number 2. And he was just, and he came in, they're even saying that his brother's better than him, at this point. So he might not even be like the best ball out playing basketball right now. So, he had all the, because he's the one that came in with the loudest noise, breaking in, all the, the press conferences and all this other fluff coming in. His brother just kind of came in and just like started dominating, but not in the flashy fashion that Lonzo Ball ended up coming into the league for. So definitely had something to prove, because he had to live up to the hype at that point, because then you just look like a jerk if you're not going to be good enough, to make all the hype. So we have the Miami Heat at 10-5 as well. How do you feel about their start?
Well, with Jimmy Butler there, and the Heat seem to be they're always in it somehow. Last year they kind of laid an egg, but this year they seem to be in it. They're going to be around. They're going to be around come playoff time. The East is wide open a little bit. So there you got a bunch of teams like within 2.5, 3 games from the top seed.
But competitive though. I mean, this
Right.
is not the East that you grew up with if you're 20, 25 years old. This is not the East that was, for the older fans like us that remember the 90s basketball and all the great East teams that were there. Like, this is a renaissance, I think, year for the Eastern Conference. And, aside from, when you get to the finals, there's been a couple finals teams that have, eventually won, but it doesn't speak for the whole conference. Usually the conference just bottoms out. The last 7, 8 seed go in with a losing record, looking, just basically just being there just to get an extra week of season, because then they end up getting smacked in 3 games by whoever finishes the first and second seed. But right now, I mean, this is a very competitive East, and it's just up and down the lineup. You have great records, you have great teams, there's great parity where any team can win any night. And I think it's fantastic, and it's more of a enjoyable, watchable game of NBA basketball than it was in past years.
I absolutely agree with you.
And then we have, so I'm going to say Miami. Miami, I think, has the biggest attention to defense. I think that's how they've been able to get to the hottest start with the most underrated big-ticket superstar in Jimmy Butler. Jimmy Butler doesn't get talked about enough, but he's an absolute proven winner. He's won, everywhere he's gone as far as taking teams to the playoffs that probably maybe shouldn't have been there, or getting deep into playoff runs. I mean, who saw the Miami Heat going to the 2020 finals? But Jimmy Butler was just absolutely incredible, and he's just the most underrated superstar, I believe, in the NBA.
I believe so. I believe he is. He came to the Bulls organization. Tom Thibodeau helped him establish himself as the good player that he is. He plays good defense, and he's a good scorer.
Yeah, definitely all around great player. He'll definitely be in the All-Star game, no doubt about it. Then we also have the surprise. So we start getting into the more surprising section of the show, where we have the Charlotte Hornets at 9-7. They were, dipping, coming back down to earth maybe a little bit. But do you see them making the playoffs?
If they do, I see them the bottom, at about probably the 8th seed. Maybe they can sneak in, but I don't see them climbing no more higher than that.
Yeah, it's a tough sell for me as far as the Charlotte Hornets go, because we're looking at a situation where there's not a whole hell of a lot of depth on that team. So you have an injury to LaMelo Ball or somebody else prominent on that team definitely will hinder them as they are coming back down to earth anyway. So basically, they start out hot out the gate, and then the NBA franchises and the defensive masterminds and everybody else in these organizations, they get the book on you, and then they start learning how to defend you and eventually win the game. So I don't think they have the greatest lasting power, but they're showing how close they are to being prominent. That's my belief on that team. Then we have another one in a similar situation where the Cleveland Cavaliers 9-7. What do you think?
Now that's the shocker. They have a good young team, but they're scrappy.
Yeah.
I remember them playing the Knicks a few times, and they just play scrappy ball. And I'm looking at that team, and I'm like, how are they winning? And so they're just a bunch of scrappy players. They're kind of like the Orlando Magic. Orlando is they're one of those scrappy 3-4 win teams, but they play hard. They play hard. Their wins don't show it, but they do play hard.
Yeah. So we have and the Cleveland Cavaliers. The one big takeaway from the offseason, what they did was they signed pretty much every 6'11" and above free agent that they could. I mean, they have easily the tallest team in the NBA, and they are just it serves to their scrappiness. You have that basically defensive wall, like literal wall that you have to get through in order to score regularly. And it's working out for them so far in the early season. Then we get to the other local team, which is the New York Knicks. I would personally like to have talked about them a little earlier in the show, but they've hit a couple of a couple rough patches, a couple games that they possibly should have won and did not. 8-7. How serious are these New York Knicks, and how deep do you see them getting into the playoffs?
That's a tough one to sell right now, because they're too inconsistent right now on both ends of the floor. The starters are not playing to their level of cohesiveness. It's always the second unit that's bringing them from back from behind, and they're always falling behind. So the Knicks, they need to kind of gel with that starting five a little bit. Maybe Thibodeau tweaks the starting rotation, but everybody's saying that they need time to gel, but this is basically the same team that they had last year.
Yeah.
So I don't know. I mean, gel. they should have been jailed by now.
Yeah.
You know.
Well,
So.
on paper, it was the same team as last year, except you have Kemba Walker coming over and Evan Fournier, two big prominent free agents, and tons of money and just tons of lofty expectations. I mean, what was it? Where they had Peyton last year starting off as the point guard before they had to, put in Derrick Rose and have him overextended on minutes that he wasn't normally accustomed to, and ultimately being the only real prominent playoff performer that they had in that short first-round series from last season. Now we have this situation where it looked like they had put all the dots together, and even Evan Fournier, he came out, he had the first opening game where he went over 30 points, and then now it seems like he hasn't went over 30 points since. Seems like he's in the 12 to 15 point range. How do you see them being able to get the starters going, or do you see the mixing and matching more of the lineups?
I think it's the lineups. They just too inconsistent on offense, and there's been one time with the starting five, they did not come in the game the whole fourth quarter. So Thibodeau kept the bench in, and the bench was playing well, better than the starting five. So, I mean, at some point they have to get it together. They're too good of a team, talented-wise, to go through the inconsistent struggles that they're going through now. I'm hopeful that they pull it together, and I think they will. I think they will at some point in time for the playoffs, and I think they will make the playoffs. How far they go, that's just to be determined. The Knicks can go as far as they can take themselves.
Absolutely.
So sometimes they bury themselves in games, and sometimes they have to try not to do that because they're killing themselves. Like last night against Orlando Magic, they killed themselves.
Yeah.
They came back from I think it was a 14-point lead that Orlando held, and they came back in the fourth quarter. So they got what it takes to do it, but they couldn't sustain it.
Yeah, I think the learning curve that they've had as far as getting, beating up on opponents that they should have to fluff up the win total, and also the closing out of games. Those two things that are not exactly gelling at this point, but they have the pieces to do it. They've been lucky enough not to have significant injuries or really any injuries of any kind at this in the early going of the season. So definitely a lot of time to get this stuff together. I think they end up having a 7-8 game run of wins together and then start really looking good. I'm going to say, and it's very hard to bet on the Knicks. I mean, there's no betting line, I'm sure, that should be ever taken on the New York Knicks, especially for New York Knicks fans. But I'm going to say that they can get to the Eastern Conference Finals. I don't know if they get any further than that as presently constructed, but I think they have the pieces to do it, and all they have to do is just put it together, and they have all these months to go in order to make that happen. All right, now we have the 76ers, who are 8-7. So now we're getting to the upside down part of these standings right now, because we the 8-7 for a team that was clearing above the number one. Well, I'd say record-wise, they were the number one seed last year, and they were one of the top teams of the last season. What do you make of them, and how impacted is the Ben Simmons factor into this?
It factored in a lot. They're obviously not the same team without Ben Simmons there. They're just an average team, and I'm not sure if they can even make any noise. They might find themselves on the outside looking in. To be honest with you, right now they're just they're skating above above water right now. I'm not sure how far they can go. I just don't think they can go any farther without that legit star there.
All right.
Ben Simmons.
So who enters a game this season first? Ben Simmons or Kyrie Irving?
If I want to take my bet, I'm going to say Ben Simmons.
Oh, okay. Why?
Just because of the whole vaccination ordeal with Irving. You just don't know when this is going to end. But Ben Simmons, he just wants to be out. He just wants to be out of Philly.
Yeah.
So he's not holding back anything. He just wants to be in a different situation. So you put Ben Simmons in a different situation, he's going to play ball.
So I think as far as the difference between the the Brooklyn Nets and the Philadelphia 76ers is the Nets are kind of hampered by this, and there's a lot of ego when it comes to Kyrie Irving and where he would end up. As far as Ben Simmons is down to go anywhere, but the Philadelphia 76ers are in the position where they don't have to just dump him and get any trade. Yes, it would help the morale, I'm sure, of the locker room and, just the fans in general, just to be rid of the situation. But they're holding him hostage for the best deal that they can get, and they're not willing to waver on that at this time. And I think that they're not willing to waver on it the whole season. I think they would definitely let him sit out the whole season or be suspended or whatever the technical case is for it, not to get a lame deal in return. Like, they're not going to just trade him for 2 second-round picks or anything like that. Like, they want maximum value for what Ben Simmons can potentially be, and they're not going to settle for anything less.
Me personally, I think it's hurting both. It's hurting both Simmons and the 76ers because now they're not the team that they were last year, and Ben Simmons is now costing himself money. So
Absolutely.
Without each other, they are just, Ben Simmons is not playing, and the 76ers are not playing up to their potential. So.
Absolutely, but then you have a situation where if you just get rid of him and just get him out of town and take a lame deal, then what stops a Joel Embiid from doing this? Who's also a big, strong personality. I'm not going to say they're similar, personality types, but it's a big, strong personality. So what was to say, in a year or two, maybe he's not the happiest guy in the whole world and not, loving the 76ers anymore, or whatever the case is, and then he ends up trying to do the same thing. Then you just another superstar player, hamstringing the franchise. And I think it's a big stance from what the 76ers are doing right now, and taking that stance like we are not going to be run over by a player. And I think that's a bold move in today's NBA to be able to go through that. And when it ends, nobody knows. But I think I like the stance the 76ers are taking the old school stance.
I like it myself. Yeah. I like it myself. Right now, I think Ben Simmons is being a little bit selfish.
100%.
Yeah, he's not. He's not doing anything good for his teammates right now.
Yeah.
And I think it's immature. Whoever's in his ear needs to stay out of it because he's just.
Absolutely, he's just lessening his value over that time too, which also hurts the 76ers. But the 76ers, they have a strong stance on it. They're like, we're either going to get what we deserve for the former first overall pick, or you could just sit out and we won't care.
And I think they're willing to sacrifice the season and perhaps maybe going to the lottery.
Yeah.
So, that's just the stance that they're taking, and I agree with it 100%. So we'll see what happens for the rest of the season when it comes to that.
All right, so we're going to talk about the Boston Celtics. Boston Celtics are 7-8 right now. They are littered with first-round talent, former first-round picks, or first-round picks that they've selected themselves. What do you think is going on with this team? They have not looked all that impressive this whole season.
Well, that's the Boston's. They were for a few years. They were dominant in the East for a while, and then they just. I'm not sure what happened. There were some injuries, I believe, that happened to a few of their players, and then I think a few of their players left either via trade or free agency. I'm not sure, but yeah, they just fallen off the face of this planet. And now you got the top teams, the top dogs like Brooklyn and Milwaukee and the Knicks, and you can even throw the Pacers in there, at the same time. And then you got Cleveland, which is surprising. You wouldn't expect Cleveland to be up there with them. Yeah. So they're even a little bit better than the Celtics right now.
I'd say that this, since Danny Ainge's departure a few years ago, they don't have that strong. I don't think they've had the same strong front like they had. You had the fraud. Danny Ainge was doing the wheeling, the dealing. He was making these risky deals just to get ahead, and he ended up getting ahead and then getting the first round picks and putting themselves in position that they were dominant in the East for a lot of those years. But it seems like just the bottom's falling out. They have they have personality clashes where guys are coming out in the media and saying things bad towards the team itself. Very ugly situation going on there. But you also have the situation where you have all these first round picks, all these like top end talent that could go to other places. So let's say if they fire Sell, they could fire Sell and then end up putting themselves in a great position moving forward and building around like a Tatum, depending on which superstars they end up deciding to keep. All right, so we're going to skip around a little bit. So we're going to talk about last year's Eastern Conference Finals. We mentioned it earlier in the show. So we have the Bucks at 7-8, the world champion Bucks, and then we have the Atlanta Hawks at 7-9. What is going on with these teams?
This is well, for the Bucks, I could tell you that Middleton was hurt for a little bit. So they had a few hurt players that were important keys to their championship run last year. So once they get those players back, I think they will become the Bucks again that we all know. So I think they're going to jump up. They're going to be there in the end. The Atlanta Hawks, that's a little bit shocking to me. I'm not sure what's going on with them. They are I mean, Trae Young he's just not playing, up to his capabilities as he was last year. I'm not sure if it's just the coaching or if it's just the players around him or, I do expect them to go on a little bit of a run, maybe towards maybe All-Star break, maybe after.
Well, the last year they ended up replacing the coach, and then Nate McMillan ended up taking over, and then that's when they got hot, went on the runs, and eventually got to the Eastern Conference Finals, to the shocking most of the league. Now, are they notoriously slow starters? That could possibly be the case. And in this format that they have now, so let me get your opinion on before we get back to the Atlanta Hawks. So the way that the playoff system now, they kept the COVID playoff format. Well, they actually built on it. The one they ended up having last year is where 10 teams end up making the playoffs in each conference. The first 6 teams are automatically into the playoffs, and then they have play-in games between the 7 and 10 seeds in order to decide who ends up being the actual 7 and 8 seed. What do you think of that playoff format?
I do not like it. I'm from the old school basketball, 1 through 8. So the 8th seed is just the 8th seed.
Yeah.
I don't like all that other stuff that's thrown around. You're tweaking the game, with that, and I don't like it.
Yeah, I'm absolutely agree 100%. I think it's trying to replicate what the baseball does as far as the wild card, the play-in game, which I'm not all that much of a fan of over there either. I actually think they should expand the 1 to 8 when it comes to baseball because you have the same amount of teams in that league. I mean, even football ended up upping to 7 teams in each conference. And then you have baseball that just has 5 and then a play-in game and then ends up becoming 4. In this situation, I don't like the way it ends up working out because you basically, the 10th team in any conference is going to be somebody with a losing record. So you're basically just rewarding that. And then depending on how hot they are and how they end up coming in is the way they're going to eventually get into the playoffs. It's just really weird that they keep the stance on it. But that's what they have going on. So, as far as what you normally would believe is a playoff team, like let's say like a Charlotte. Charlotte could very easily jump into the 9 or the 10 seed, which ultimately would not be a playoff spot, but turns into a playoff spot in this current format.
Can you imagine if they get hot and run into the Eastern Conference?
Yeah. I mean, it seems like that there's always a surprise team that ends up coming out. I'm hoping it's the New York Knicks that ends up surprising the hell out of everybody and ends up doing that. I mean, that'd be cool. That'd be super cool. But there's always a team that ends up running into and having the runs at the end of the season, surprisingly to everybody. And it is a very long way to go as far as the way these teams will shape up, and a lot of the shifting and standings are definitely going to happen throughout the course of the whole season. All right, so in the Western Conference, we have the Golden State Warriors who are back, and right now they are 12-2, and they do not have Klay Thompson back yet. What do you think is going on? And what is your opinion on Klay Thompson? Do you think he will actually end up coming back, and how effective will he be after being out for more than 2 years?
Oh, yeah. I was reading that he's got about 2 weeks. I think he's rehabbing right now. So he's on his way back. And once he gets back, watch out. the Golden State Warriors are back, and they are for real, and they're playing basketball the way that they played a couple years ago. So, and they're gonna be there, and to be honest with you, they're my pick out of the West right now. The Lakers, that's a whole different other story. Just don't think they can take out Golden State. Golden State, they have so much depth right now.
Well, right now the Lakers are 8-8. So what do you think is going on there, and how are they going to be able to overcome what they have going on right now?
Well, number one, LeBron obviously is he keeps that team rolling. So without LeBron, they're just, you would think that they have, they got Carmelo Anthony, they got Russell Westbrook, Anthony Davis, Dwight Howard. So, I mean, you think with that team that they would even be able to beat the Bulls, and they couldn't beat the Bulls. So I'm not sure what's going on there. I kind of knew from the jump that there was going to be a little bit of a gel problem, because all of those guys are ball dominant, so they have to have the rock in their hands. And this is not like the Miami Heat situation where you had Dwayne Wade, Chris Bosh, and LeBron James. You know, they were able to work through that. These guys right here, especially Westbrook, they have to have the ball in their hands. I just don't see it working.
Yeah, I think the one interesting aspect of that changes regular season basketball teams to playoff basketball teams is the fact that you don't, like, it's not smart to play a player 48 minutes a game, the entire game, or play them 46 minutes, 45 minutes, consistently the whole game. I think that's, a part of what's hampering the Milwaukee Bucks, because, you can't really, throughout the whole playoff season, it seemed like Giannis was just out there for every single big moment. It just take 2 minutes off to start maybe the third or the fourth, and then that's it. He's back in there, if that at all. I'm sure a lot of the final series he ended up playing the whole game, and that's the difference. You instead of having a superstar player in that position for 48 minutes, you have these bench players coming in. You're trying to space out minutes. You're trying to keep people healthy, and that's where a lot of the disconnect comes from. So when you have a situation with Los Angeles Lakers where you have a Russell Westbrook who could easily play 48 minutes a game. He's one of the most well-conditioned athletes out there, even at a bit of an older age, quote unquote, but older age for an athlete. And you have all these players that they're used to being in there. They're not used to sitting down. So when they come back in, it's hard for them to get in rhythms and such like that. And the Los Angeles Lakers, they're just kind of getting exposed where they're not going to be anything without LeBron James. But, that's kind of like the worst-kept secret, because, no team that LeBron James has ever been on is going to be good without him. That's just the way it goes.
Sure.
So, we have the Phoenix Suns at 11-3. What do you think about them? Do you think they replicate last year?
Yeah, they're picking up where they left off. They're good. They're going to be right there, and I have them with the Golden State Warriors in the West Conference Finals. I
say the emergence of DeAndre Ayton, who, everybody was talking about him big last year. I don't even think he's hit the ceiling on his potential. So now it just, he also has the big contract to play for. He's disrespected openly, saying that he was deserving of the extension, didn't get the big money extension right now. They're willing to wait until after the season to talk about that. So he has something to prove, and he's maturing, and that's only helping the franchise that much more. Which also helps the fact that Devin Booker is one of those victims of the slower starts than he's been accustomed to and having in the playoffs. But yeah, definitely Phoenix. They arrived last year, and they're continuing on with that. So we'll skip around a little bit. So Denver is 9-5, and also Dallas is 9-5. What do you make of them? They are 4th and 5th.
I just don't see them as a serious contender. They're going to be around in the playoff hunt. They're going to be able to sustain that, but I just don't see them making any noise in the playoffs.
Yeah.
I got Utah, Phoenix, and Golden State fighting for the Western Conference Finals.
I'd say Denver. Denver's one of those teams that is just overdue for a real nice, successful playoff run and eventual championship. And it's always something that comes up that hurts them. I'd say maybe the baseball equivalent to the Texas Rangers, where the Texas Rangers were always so close a couple of those years, and just because They just weren't able to go over the hump, and there's just always going to be something in Denver's way. They're not going to be able to do it. If this is the year they do it, then that'd be fantastic, and that would be like the big shocker I think that everybody would crave after when it comes to interesting storylines, especially when your favorite team ends up not being in it. You want to kind of gravitate toward that unsung team, and that would be Denver if they ended up making it. But whether that happens, I don't know. Then we have the Clippers on the underwhelming 9-5.
Another one of those teams. That's another one of those teams like Denver. So they're right there every year, and they just can't get over the hump.
Yeah, but they have the two big superstars, and they also did like the Brooklyn Nets, where they ended up mortgaging their future in order to get Paul George. I mean, ridiculously, they gave up 4 or 5 first-round picks or something crazy like that. I mean, it was just insane, that deal just to get Paul George in there.
Well, it kind of reminds me of, remember the Brooklyn Nets when they traded for Kevin Garnett and Paul Pierce and Ray Allen. They weren't able to win a championship, and they sacrificed the house. So,
just a tough. It's tough setting for the Clippers. I mean, they went for it, and they are not reaping the benefits of it in this early going. Then you have Portland at 8-8, which is looking pretty good, I'd say. Memphis Grizzlies are 7-7, holding down the 9th spot. What do you think of Ja Morant, and how much of a superstar is he?
He's good. I love Ja. He's good. They just don't have the necessary pieces to compete with those top dogs in the West. They're still some years away, but Ja is a really good player. And once he gets the pieces, or once they put the pieces around him, they're going to be contenders.
All right, so we're going to look at OKC, the Oklahoma Thunder, the Sacramento Kings, and the Minnesota Timberwolves. Do you think any of them make the playoffs? And let's say if any of them make the top 6.
No, I think they're all going to be lottery picks. I expect them just to stay where they are and just fight whoever gets the ball, gets the lottery ball.
I'm going to say Minnesota has pieces. Like, they have really great pieces as far as what they've constructed there. It just seems like all they need to do is just grow. Have those young superstars. If the faster they grow, the better off they're going to be. I think that would be. I think they're going to ascend kind of like the way the Atlanta Hawks did, where they kind of just came out of nowhere and just won a bunch of games at the end of the season and ended up getting to the playoffs. I mean, they could be a team that pulls off a trade, to get a superstar in the deadline, and different things like that, or maybe have a rental try to come in, let's say when Jimmy Butler went to the 76ers that one year. That's a very possible scenario, and I think they have the pieces, they have the draft pick, they have the collateral in order to get somebody big in there. Let's say from a Boston Celtics, if the Boston Celtics continue to dive, they can get somebody from the Celtics and really start taking off, and I think make a deep run. I'm going to say that the Minnesota Timberwolves end up making the playoffs. I'd say the top 8. I'd say that could happen.
We'll see. Right now, Towns is going to have to step up a little bit more, and they're going to have to maybe at the deadline try to make a trade that can put them over the top a little bit into the playoffs conversations at least.
All right. So we only have a couple more minutes left in the show. So I want to ask, does anybody? We'll shift over to football a little bit. Does anybody in the NFC East going to catch up to the Dallas Cowboys?
I say no.
Okay.
I say no. The Cowboys are they got what it takes right now to be to stay exactly where they are. They may lose a few games here and there for the rest of the season, but they're going to stay on top of the NFC East.
Yeah, I'm going to have to definitely agree on that. I think it's I mentioned it a couple of times in the show in the past. It's unfortunate, the Giants are a couple of bounces here and there and a couple of games away from having a winning record, even somewhat challenging the Dallas Cowboys, at least to even make the playoffs, try to make some noise. and they just kind of like, now it just seems to the point where it's just not going to happen. Tough. All right, so we got. It seems like the way the NFL is going, like the AFC's wide open. You don't have like the Titans right now are 8-2. That could be a bit of a smokescreen, especially without having Derrick Henry and being in such a ridiculously bad division overall as far as wins go, with the Texans and the Jaguars just collecting, basically jockeying for draft picks at that point. What is your opinion on the AFC versus the NFC overall as far as competitiveness?
I agree with you on the AFC. Right now, it's wide open. I guess the same can be said with the NFC. There's really no team. I mean, if you could take the Arizona Cardinals out of the AFC maybe and put them in conversations with a team that was perhaps running away with some things, but I'm not sure how trustworthy they are. The NFC, is there really any team that's really dominant? I guess you can put Tampa Bay still in that conversations. Anytime Tom Brady's there, I mean, you still have to keep that in the conversation.
Absolutely.
So, but other than that, I mean, I think it's just wide open.
Yeah, right now, the way it looks, Dallas pretty much has the NFC East wrapped up. The Packers are 8-2, definitely have that division wrapped up with, the Bears and the Vikings and the underwhelming Lions, who the Lions aren't going to go undefeated because they had a tie last week with the Pittsburgh Steelers, so they won't be the, most defeated team. So they end up, notching that belt and got a little half win there. Then you have, the South seems to be the most competitive division with the Bucs at 6-3, New Orleans at 5-4, which you don't know what you're going to get from them, and the Panthers at 5-5, which seem to be slowly getting back down to earth with a lot of their injuries.
Well, let's indulge in the Panthers a little bit.
Okay.
Cam Newton. So now that they got Cam Newton back, I seen that he was leading the charge in last week's game, and they ended up being victorious. So maybe that's just a new. Are we seeing a new Cam?
Oh boy! I mean, I would love it. I think the way the Patriots situation happened last year, even just the fact that it took him almost the middle of the season to latch onto a team is pretty bad. I think, especially for a former MVP. But that's where they are, so that they could possibly make some noise. They're only a game and a half away from the Buccaneers, so it is plausible that they can make something happen. And then you have the West, where the Cardinals are 8-2, the Rams are 7-3, and then everybody else just meh. But in the AFC, we have the North Division and the West Division with all teams that are 500 or better, pretty much wide open, depending on how you look at it. I'm going to say that the AFC is not what it used to be. I don't think they have they don't have like that clear, dominant runaway team. The way the Patriots were. Even though arguably the Titans could be in that conversation because the New England Patriots ended up benefiting from a lot of poor teams in their division, beating them twice in a season, in order to fluff up kind of their record going into the playoffs. So I don't know. I'm not completely sold on the Tennessee Titans team, especially with Ryan Tannehill at the helm. I don't know. It just doesn't seem like they'll ever be like that over the top Super Bowl championship winning team, especially without Derrick Henry. So I don't know. It's super wide open. It just seems like whoever's the hottest team at the end is going to be able to make the most noise. But kudos to the New England Patriots, who basically, with a roster that should be like 3-7, they're right now they're 6-4, and they are a half game away from the Buffalo Bills. Do you think the Patriots end up winning this division?
No, I think Buffalo would take it still. I don't think the Patriots. They will be a wild card team. I think they're going to be in the wild card, but I just don't think they're going to be. I think they can't sustain the division. So I got the Bills coming out of that.
All right, so. We'll take a look at the AFC North into a little more detail. We have the Baltimore Ravens at 6-3, took a tough loss last week. The Pittsburgh Steelers at 5-3-1 now. The Bengals at 5-4 and the Browns at 5-5. Who do you see coming out of that division ultimately?
So those are a bunch of teams that are just like right there with each other, neck to neck.
Yeah.
I possibly could see. I think the Ravens are gonna end up coming out of there. I see the Ravens coming out of there. They still got a good team. It's just neck and neck. It's just so hard to choose. But if I had to choose a team, I would choose the Ravens.
Yeah, I'm gonna say the biggest surprise of this division is not where people are successfully. I think it's the Pittsburgh Steelers. Everybody thought that they'd be just dead in the water at this point and be, last place in this division, and basically all the success that they've had recently, like catching up with them, and they were gonna take a dive. But
I mean, they're there. They're not a dominant team.
Yeah.
But they're there. If you place them in the division with, let's say, Arizona Cardinals, they wouldn't be in conversation.
Yeah, I definitely agree with that. All right, so now we're going to skip over a little bit. We're going to talk a little bit of baseball news. Noah Syndergaard signs with the Anaheim Angels for $21 million for 1 year. What do you think? What do you make of that?
I didn't think the Mets were going to let that happen.
Yeah.
That was shocking to the Angels, too. The Angels seem to get all these guys, and then they haven't won the World Series in so long. Yet they got I see Mike Trout as the best player in baseball. He's been there. I think he's underrated because he doesn't get talked about a lot because the Angels haven't been successful.
Yeah, when you talk about trying to acquire top talent, like the Anaheim Angels, it's never from a lack of trying. They've always had the highest payrolls. They've always had, like basically going for it. It's not like they're, like a franchise that just tries to go on the cheap and try to just work their way over there. They always go for it. We have last year's signing of Anthony Rendon, where he ends up hurting himself and not being all that available. Mike Trout had his first real big significant injury where he missed most of the season last year. And then you have Noah Syndergaard, who they signed for $21 million for 1 year, who hasn't really been healthy for like 3 years. That is just, it's kind of just like getting in front of it and just doing it ahead of time. Because, like, do we really see Noah Syndergaard having 30-plus starts next year? I really don't. So, like, for $21 million, let's say if he makes 21 starts, that would be something of impressive. Just because his track history is just he hasn't been able to stay on the field. Depending on whatever various issues he's had. I'm not gonna say it's a knock on him, personally or anything like that, but it's just not available. If you're not available, you're not any real use to your team. And
look at that Angels lineup, though.
Yeah.
I mean, if you have Ohtani, you have Trout.
Yeah.
I mean, now you got Syndergaard. I mean, do they got Bryce Harper? They got
no. Bryce Harper is of Philadelphia.
He's okay. He's with
Yeah.
Philadelphia. Okay, but still, they have the team to actually win a World Series.
Yeah.
But they still haven't been able to do it.
Yeah, it's the health is definitely the biggest factor on that team. It will always be the biggest factor on that team, and until they prove otherwise, you just basically just throwing money out the window, really. Because I mean, they don't even sell out every game. It would be different if they sold out every game and was able to sustain these kind of lofty numbers, but it just doesn't seem to make much business sense when that is the one problem on your team, and then you add another injury-prone player, expensive player at that, into the mix.
They don't get they don't generate a lot of fans. I'm gonna tell you. This past season, I went to a Yankees Angels game down in Anaheim, and I'm gonna tell you, 80% of them were Yankee fans. So they were actually making noise for the Yankees. That was surprising to me. And that's got to be demoralizing for the home team.
Yeah, absolutely. They have to. It's going to be interesting to see how that unfolds, and if they, then you have the two great, one great team that was, just came from the World Series, which is the Houston Astros, and then you have the Oakland A's, who always defy logic but are always contenders every single year, with not the sexiest lineups, but they just make it happen. So you have those teams. So are we going to say that the Angels are better than those two teams right now? And with Noah Syndergaard, it all depends on if they're actually going to be available to play. And we have Corey Seager and Carlos Correa that are still out there as free agents. Where do you see those two guys going?
I see Seager signing with the Yankees. Correa, I either see him either going back to Houston or another team is going to make a play for him. But I don't see Correa going over to the Yankees. And it has nothing to do with the Derek Jeter comments or anything like that. I think Seager is just a better fit at Yankee Stadium than Correa is.
Yeah, I'd say the one attractive part of Correa, which I love his game and Jose Altuve just from an objective standpoint, because I mean obviously I don't like really anything Houston related, especially from those years that they were doing their shenanigans. But when they've proven after that they're still able to hit in October, those are 3 and 4 slot hitters that can hit in October, and that is a premium, especially for the New York Yankees or any team that would have success in the playoffs. You need your 3 and 4 hitters to be the big boppers. You need them to come up in these clutch moments against the top pitchers and the top pitchers in the bullpen and perform. And those are something that those two have been able to prove that they can do even after their shenanigans and being the doors getting blown off with the whole cheating scandals and such. But even after that, they were still able to make it to the World Series this year. Last year, they had pretty formidable. They made it to the ALCS, so they're still formidable. And that was the one thing that even when they were beating the Yankees and moving on, like they're always hitting in October, and that's the big thing. So I would say I would want a Correa more because he can hit in October. He's proven it, and it's something that is very lacking in this New York Yankees organization. All right, so that does it for our show this week. Thank you very much, Anthony Samroo, for stopping by. LDM Radio Sports Talk.